Welcome to episode 4 of the Apprentice Spotlight series. Now, on today's episode, I had the pleasure of speaking with a very bright, a very smart, and a very resilient young lady who is a pipe fitter by trade. And she had a lot to tell us about her life, about her situation, about all the things that she's encountering when it comes to the job process and what it's like for her having gone through, and we'll get into that episode. So, come on in. Let's listen to her story. We've got an issue with apprenticeships in general and how registered apprenticeship programs from a union perspective are one of the best kept secrets, but they shouldn't be. And we're not doing our job at getting the word out, and we're not doing our job at mentoring. So we'll get into that as well, because I'm curious. And then, so when I start out, I usually like to ask this question, or kind of start off with the statement. What was your background like? What was it like growing up? Like, were you a trade family? Were you not a trade family? What, just kind of set the stage, if you will, set the foundation for the rest of this podcast episode. So take 5 minutes, whatever. Tell us, who you are and your background and growing up and all that kind of stuff.
All right. Well, my name is Emily. I'm a member of local 597 Pipefitters in Chicago. I did not grow up in a trade family at all. I actually grew up in the suburb of the city of Chicago, and it was completely white collar. I was fed my whole life that I needed to go to college. It was my only option, that the trades just were never talked about. So growing up, I had the idea in my head that I was going to be going to a 4-year college because that's all I knew. But I had a rough time in high school. I didn't really know where I wanted to go with my life. So I was getting fed that I needed to go to a 4-year. I didn't want to go to a 4-year. So I chose the in-between, and I went to community college. So I went to community college because I felt pressure from my family, pressure from my town, that this was the only option. And even that was disappointing, honestly, that I was going there. But I did that, and I needed electives for my degree, and I was looking through the course pamphlet one day, and I saw they had a welding program. And I thought, hey, that's going to be really cool because I need the elective. Why not take something that's fun? And I took that welding class, and it just took me one class and I was hooked. I loved welding so much. So I was originally planning to get my associates in science, which I still did. But I also took so many welding classes that I was able to graduate with my advanced welding certificate too. So that's kind of what got me into the trades. Had I not stumbled upon seeing that course pamphlet with the welding classes, I would have never found out, and I would have been on the original trajectory that I thought I would be on. And it goes a lot deeper, and I can talk more about how I got into the union.
Yeah. Well, this is the platform, right? So I think that, so you mentioned that because I talk about this and I write about this quite a bit, actually. I have routinely said, so I catch a little bit of flack from people because I'm usually very, I don't want to say aggressive, but let's call a spade for a second. When we don't ask good questions, we don't have dialogue. I certainly don't think that culture in general has your best interest in mind, because predatory loan agencies and things like this. And I'm always like, look, first off, it's not that, like, the thought that you could graduate high school at the age of 18, you might have had a part-time job for a couple of years, maybe. Mm-hmm. And I go, well, do you know what you want to do for the rest of your life? And you're like, nope. I'm like, oh, this is scandalous. This is not that big a deal. I want you at the age of 18 to, without any experience, choose what you're going to do for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
And so I'm always like, look, if you don't know what you want to do, go get a job. Just go get any job to get this started.
Absolutely.
Don't sit here and say, well, you got to go to college. You got to go. Why? what,
Yeah.
like, and so it's actually refreshing to me to see the usage of social media for people who are saying, this is the direction that I went.
Hmm.
Guidance counselors were pushing me to go to college. My parents were talking about it, my family. And I'm telling you that this is not the the right way or whatever.
Yeah.
So it's you're making a point, at least to me anyway, when you say, "Hey, my family was pushing me to go," and the very fact that I went to community college, and that was upsetting for them,
Hmm.
is kind of it's very telling. So, what was the trajectory? What were you like? What were you studying for? Like, what were they trying to push you towards, or what is it that you were
Hmm.
initially pursuing?
Okay. I will say that both my parents have their doctorates, so they're very educated people.
Hmm.
Um, and I don't think it was obviously people change and grow, and it's a different place now. But at the time, they saw what they achieved, and I think they wanted the same for us.
Hmm.
So that's why college was pushed so heavily as well. Um, I mean, my whole life I've always loved animals, and I've always loved science and math. So when I was going through college, I knew that I would probably want to work with animals some way in the field. So I was originally planning to be a vet. And when I saw those welding classes, I was like, okay, I have a lot of years of college ahead of me. So I planned on doing welding as my job, paying myself through college. But I realized I just wanted to weld.
um, and at what point through so you get done with your welding certificate, because I took welding classes in college too. So a little
Okay.
bit of background about me. I did the same thing. I mean, I'm 43, and when
Hmm.
I was coming up in high school, that's all you ever heard. So I live I live on the East Coast, and we have the largest concentration of military anywhere in the country right here. And so if you didn't hear about college, it was the military, like
Yeah.
as if it was a fallback. Well, you can go into you got to go to college. Oh, by the way, you could go into the military. And so I did the same thing. Well, I got to go to college. And then life happens. You quit doing it. I end up in the trades, and I never really looked back. Now, I did go back. I finished a construction manager's bachelor's and some engineering associate degrees, and I took some welding classes. Not because I wanted the time in the booth is what I wanted.
Yeah.
As an iron worker, you're doing a lot of structural welding. But if I wanted to mess around with 6G, if I want to mess around with 6G pipe TIG,
Hmm.
um, I'm not going to find that in the field. I got to go into I got to go into the booth to do it, and that's what I did. So I understand the allure, when it comes to it. But so you finish up with your welding certificate, and then what happens?
Okay. So, um, I before I graduated, I started job searching because I knew I needed a welding job, and I applied to like 80 different jobs, and I had not heard back
Wow,
from a single one. And
really?
yeah, could have been the time, whatever. But I didn't hear back from a single one until I heard back from one job, and I got so excited. I went in and I took my field test. I passed my field test, and I got my job. So that was really exciting for me because landed my first welding job. And it was a non-union fab shop job, so they made plastic forming machines.
Hmm.
The job really helped me because it it taught me how to machine. I was doing structural work because we were building these machines. I was welding pressure vessels. There were so many good things that I learned at this job because I was really just thrown in and every day handed a print and say, "Hey, build it." And that's what I got.
Right.
um, but it was non-union and I was really overworked and underpaid. I mean, I was putting
Hmm.
in 65-hour weeks and I was getting paid a lot less than my male colleagues that I
Uh-huh.
was overseeing. So there was good and bad aspects to it, but ultimately taught me the basics, and it taught me how to be tough in the trades. It was because I faced things there, and I learned I had to just move on from them. And I'm, at the end of the day, really grateful for the experience that I had there going into the union.
So how long did you work there?
So I worked there for a year.
Okay, so you're there. So you apply, you get there, you're there for a year,
I
and
could get into the application process a little more because that's got a fun story to it, I guess.
I'm all about it.
Yeah.
Um, I just want to. There's a point of clarification. So when you go to work for this firm, this fab shop, how long? Because you mentioned that you had people working for you, if you will, or
Yeah.
working under you. How
Hmm.
long was it? Was that immediate, or was it? Okay,
No.
well, you've been here 2 months, or whatever it is.
It was honestly towards the end, right before I left, but I was making smaller machines on my own, and I had like two guys under me, and they were getting paid higher than I was.
Yeah, that's why you get non-union firms that'll be like, you should not be talking about salary. And I'm like, if you're being told that you shouldn't be talking about salary, it's usually because
Yeah.
there's some sketch stuff going on around
Uh
there.
huh.
So, okay, so you get done with this, and by this time, before we get into the application process,
Hmm.
by this time, what is the family, friends, what's the thought process for them? Because I know that initially they wanted you to go a certain route. By
Yeah.
this time, you're being fulfilled, even though you're finding out that, let's call it what it is, even though you find out that you're being exploited,
Hmm.
um, to the degree that you are, because you're getting paid less. Now you're getting ready to go into this application process, but what is the family thought? What are the friends thinking? What's that look like? What's that atmosphere for you?
Yeah. At this point, definitely, I don't feel I was making my parents proud. My friends thought it was cool what I did, but definitely at the end of the day, they saw I was really overworked and exhausted all the time. Um, but yeah, I didn't really have, I feel, my parents in full support just yet.
Not just
Yeah, not just yet.
yeah, not just yet. Yeah, no, that's the you know there's so many people who that I've talked to, and I'm just starting this series, by the way. So I don't know if you listened to any of the other ones before, but the previous apprentice that was on here, he was a pipe fitter. He still is, by the way. But well, he's really I think he's more in the plumbing aspect of stuff.
Mm,
And I'll have conversation with him, and his experience is completely different from yours. I mean, his
yeah.
dad had a company, and so it's always nice to hear, what is your experience when it comes to your parents, because so many they buy into, and I'm not saying your parents did. I mean, they were PhDs, so they know exactly how their success route was, and
Hmm.
so that's what, obviously, that it seems to be anyway. That's what they wanted for you, and that's what they thought it would, obviously,
Yeah.
be achievable for you. But I've seen so many parents that they buy into the cultural, you've got to go to college, get a good job, thinking that those other adults, whether they're teachers, educators, or often the loudest voices in the room that have a social media platform, and they really shouldn't have a megaphone, that are
Yeah.
always talking about things that are just, it's nonsense. And so many young people get swept up into, pursue your passions for all they're worth. And I'm like, yeah, well, does that provide for you at the end of the day? Because
Yeah.
if, for every one musician that makes it, there's a million who don't. So is that really good career advice? So, um, yeah, it's always interesting to hear different people's perspectives. So,
Hmm.
um,
Definitely.
now I'm assuming that once you found out that the people that are basically working underneath you are making more money, it's like, all right, this is the straw that broke the camel's back, and I'll begin to look. So take us through. What does it look like?
Okay. So I actually, when that happened, I went in and I asked for a raise. And I was told flat out I wasn't going to get it. Now, I will say though, previously I was able to negotiate another raise for myself at that place. It was a $2 jump. I took it. But at this point, I knew I was getting paid quite a bit under the people above or below me. And I
Right.
asked for it, and they said, sorry, we can't give that to you.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was definitely, I mean, it was working so much overtime at that place. I never worked a 40-hour work week at that place. It was always 60 hours, 65 hours, 70 hours. And I was getting really exhausted from it and burnt out. So I knew I needed something soon. And I can, the union application process goes farther back than me getting this job. And
Okay.
there's, yeah.
No, I want to
Carry
know.
on. Okay,
Tell me about it.
sorry.
Oh yeah, yeah. Please do.
Um, so in my first year at college, when I was taking welding classes, was it my first year? It was my first year. Um, our teacher was a Boilermaker, or he used to be, and now he's just a teacher, well, teaching welding. And he started telling us about this apprentice or this high school community college welding competition at Local 597. And I thought it would be really cool to compete. So he needed a few people. I said I was interested, and I went and I competed in this competition. And it was
Hmm.
hosted at Local 597's training center. And I walked in and I saw it and I was like, oh, this place is so cool.
Hmm.
And I did not do well in the competition, but at the end of it, I just thought this was the coolest thing I've ever seen. I would be so happy if I could do this every day. So a month later, when applications opened up, I went down and I applied. Now, this was October of 2019 when I first applied. And so I did all this stuff, I put in my application, and I was just waiting to hear back from them about my test date. And I heard back from them, and it was actually the week of COVID that everything got shut down. So obviously, I couldn't take the test. So I had waited 9 months for this test at this point. And I was like, okay, great. I had no idea when I was going to hear back from them again. I was still in college at that point. It was fine, but I was getting antsy. I wanted to hear back from them, and it just wasn't happening. And I graduated community college. I was working in a non union job. I was really just left in the dark. I had no idea when I would hear back from them, especially being first generation. I had no
Hmm.
ins to check in. I had no idea what to do. But pretty soon after I got that non union job, I heard from them for my test date. And if I can remember correctly, I think it was only like a couple of months later that I took my test. So this was 9 months after I got my initial test date.
Hmm.
So we're already at a year and a half at this point. um, but I'm working this non union job. I'm getting burnt out and I'm feeling lost. I don't know what I'm going to hear back from the local. And so it really got to a point where it was like, I cannot do this anymore. Either I admit defeat and go back to college, or I miraculously hear from the union. So I go home that day and I applied to University of Illinois at Chicago to finish up my bachelor's because I had no idea what I was going to do with myself. And I didn't want to do it, but I also didn't want to be a failure, so to speak. So I sent in my application there, and it was honestly just like a horrible time because I was working this dead end job, and I felt, so to speak, like a failure because I didn't get what I really wanted. So I was feeling kind of lost at that point. But 2 weeks later, I got my uh, acceptance letter from UIC. But the same day, I also got my call from Local 597. So it was like perfect timing. I don't think it was a coincidence. And I got my call from Local 597, walked into the boss's office at this job I was at, and I told him I was giving my 2 weeks in because I got into the local, and he asked, just curious, how much would you be making? And I told him, and he said, there's no way we can compete with that. And I'm like, yeah, I know. You wouldn't even give me my raise earlier.
Yeah, yeah. So, um, there's a whole lot that I could say about the company culture, right, of the place that you were working at. But
hmm
um, you get in there. This is excellent news, right? So you go in there. Obviously you're going to start your apprenticeship, and you're going to make good money. And you are what year by now? What not right now? Where we're talking, what year are you?
Sorry, third year. I turned
Third
fourth year
year.
in September.
Excellent, excellent.
Yeah.
So how was your first year? Was it everything that you thought it was going to be? I mean, I'm just legitimately curious.
So my first year was good. I was at O'Hare Airport doing their
Hmm.
Terminal 5 expansion. I was there my whole year. And my foreman there put a lot of faith into me, and I was able to do a lot of stuff on my own and figure out stuff on my own. And I was just given a lot of responsibility, and he allowed me to do it. So it was great because I wasn't just sweeping a floor or organizing a gang box. I was actually working with the tools. So that part of it was really good. But there was also the same aspect that I just got into this union and just trying to figure out all the aspects of it, trying to figure out union meetings. And there were some parts that were just uncomfortable because I was trying to figure stuff out. But it was overall a very solid first year.
In your estimation, based upon the fact that you had gone through and gotten your welding certificate, because I've been on one of the things that I've done here recently to try to really, what I would say is kind of expand my reach is I've been on Reddit. Reddit's a wild, wild place,
Yeah.
and yeah, that's to say the least, right?
Yeah.
And one of the things that I run into all the time, as a matter of fact, I did a podcast episode about this, is there are so many people who confuse trade school with registered apprenticeship programs. And I was like, no,
Really?
yeah. Oh, it's amazing how many people like conflate the two. I'm like, listen, they're not, so I go through this and I'm like, listen, if you can get a registered apprenticeship program, that's what you should do. Don't do trade school because trade schools don't really care about what the job
Yeah.
market looks like. They're taking your money. But what I want to ask is, did taking all your welding, I mean, I know that it was advantageous for you because it piqued your interest. And then of course it got you to the non-union job that you ended up working before you got in. But would you say that it was helpful when you got into your apprenticeship? Did the classes or just the skill, or because I've run into that. I'm a 15-year plus apprenticeship instructor, and I'll get people that'll come in and they've been through a welding school, and I'm like, that's great, but you have no idea how little you don't know about the trade until they get
Absolutely.
in. And I'm like, let's just, I don't want to sit here and hit you over the head, but I want you to take away the arrogance for a little bit
hmm
and let's just have that discussion. So that's where I want to go with this conversation with
Okay.
you is, how
Yeah.
did that help? Did it help you? Did you have to swallow or eat a big piece of humble pie? Like, how did that work for you?
hmm Personally, I'm a firm believer that the minute that you get an ego, you block yourself from learning anything else. So that is my number one thing in life. I never want to have an ego because not only is it dangerous because you can't see what's around you, but you're
Hmm.
also blocking yourself from learning everything. So I definitely didn't walk in with an ego. And I will say, Local 597's welding standard is, if you thought you had a standard for your welds, it's 20 times higher.
Uh,
So I came in knowing that I could hold my own in a welding booth. Um, but then I got humbled very quickly because just the standard. I thought I was going to be okay with it, and I was. I worked through it pretty quickly, but it was still a lot of hours of struggling and putting my own time into the booth, even though I had previous experience. I can't imagine walking into that booth and having no experience at all. Because if you don't
Mhm.
get your welding done, you're out. And I was
You,
there some days 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. in the booth.
would you? All right. So I probably should have asked this earlier, but the local is it made up of pipe fitters and welders, or is the market enough to where it's just welders?
Our local covers service techs and fitters. So every fitter that goes through the apprenticeship program needs to learn how to weld and needs to achieve 3 certs.
Any
So
any any three certs, or are there specific ones?
they're specific ones.
Okay.
2 of them are carbon and one's a stainless cert.
Okay.
So every apprentice going through should be proficient in welding and should be able to do it.
Nice. I mean,
Yeah.
and look, this is just as much of a learning experience for me, right? My brother, so I came up through the ironworkers, and my brother, a few years after I did, came up through the pipe fitting local, or in our area, and so he's been, and they do plumbing and pipe fitting, and so they kind of lump it in. But then I've talked to some guys who, the steam fitters are a separate local, I think, from the plumbers and pipe fitters, and it's just
Yeah.
jurisdictional stuff. And so I was unsure, but
Mm-hmm.
it makes sense to me. And so it's nice that they don't compromise on quality,
Yeah.
and it makes sense to me too, because if you have, because I know there are companies that I work with, like let's say in the Charlotte, North Carolina area, we'll go down there and talk to them and help them out or whatever, and they have, and I don't know if any of the companies that you work with have a U stamp or an R stamp, where under ASME code and all that. But from an ironworker perspective, we're working under the AWS, right?
Yeah.
And as the local CWI, as one of the few CWIs that are local, I know what I need to kind of hold people to.
Mm-hmm.
But our local does not have just welders. Like there are guys who structural, or they might be doing reinforcing, or ornamental or whatever. So
Yeah.
it's interesting to hear somebody from, let's say, the Chicago area, right, where you're like,
Mm-hmm.
huh, if you don't cut the snuff when it comes to welding, you gone.
Yeah.
you know Now, during your
um.
time, were there any apprentices like that
Oh
had a
yeah.
chance and are like, I'm out?
Yeah. Absolutely. Our class started at 60-ish apprentices, and now we're down to 30. So a lot of them dropped out the first 2 weeks. A lot of people just walk in and they see that, oh my god, I have to be in this hot mill coat for 12 hours a day in welding. I
Hmm.
can't do this, and they leave.
Yeah.
I mean,
Now,
it's
I
better
have a
to
question.
find out then.
Right, you are. So let's
Yeah.
get it out of the way right from the get go. Right?
Yeah.
Can you handle? Is it, in ours? It's the space is not conditioned, so it's not heated, it's
Oh
not
yeah,
cooled.
no.
In the
Well,
wintertime, you're going,
yeah.
and get you some. So
Hmm.
it's you're right about that. Better to find out. So some of the questions on here you've already answered, because you're like, if I hadn't seen the welding class in
Yeah.
community college, I wouldn't even known about this.
Hmm.
But when you were in there, I've talked to, I don't know, by this time it's got to be at least 2 dozen welding instructors, people from the community college level to apprenticeship directors, training coordinators, all that stuff. And it's amazing to me, and I don't know what it is, and I'm curious to know. For whatever reason, I've had multiple people tell me, like, uh, women make really good welders, and I don't know what it is. Did they ever tell you that? Did you ever
Oh
hear that by
yeah, all
chance?
the time.
Yeah.
Um.
What do you think that? What do you think that? What do you think the reason is?
So
I legit want to
apparently,
know.
apparently, women have better fine motor skills, but also I think just from working side by side by men all day, it's always, hey, where is this? And I'm always like, oh, it's right there. I think we just pay attention more.
No, listen, I legitimately. See, you thought you were going to come on here, and this is just going to be you telling your story. I get to learn as well. So
Yeah,
I'm trying to take
absolutely.
advantage of the fact that I get to learn because there's,
Hmm.
ironwork is rough. And
Yeah.
so we don't have as many. I think we've got one, two, three, four, I think maybe a half a dozen
Hmm.
that I have had the pleasure of interacting with, not on the job, but just in various aspects. And so better fine motor skills and pay attention more. I think you're probably right about that. I think you're probably right. Um, has that, and this wasn't a question on this, but you've stoked my curiosity now. Have you run into any problems because of the fact that you're a woman in an industry that's predominantly male?
I mean,
And
of
if you
course.
have,
Yeah.
so
Sorry.
I am curious though, because I figured that was going to be the case. How are they handled? How do you, right? Because resiliency is a huge thing, and
Hmm.
I'm just I'm genuinely curious about how you would handle or how you have handled situations, because some people just seem to fall. Well, I'm coming into a welding booth. I got to wear this hot thing. I got to be in this welding booth for 2 hours or all day long. Like, no, I can't handle this. But some people are more resilient than others, and
Absolutely.
that includes when your coworkers can be, how do I say this in a nice PC way? Some of our coworkers in the trades can be downright jerks.
Hmm. Absolutely.
How's that been?
So, of course, I've faced it. I think it would be a miracle if you were a woman in the trades and you didn't face it at one point.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I've gotten better at handling those situations. I personally, people can learn resilience, but some people are just born to be resilient, so to speak. And it could be how your childhood was. I mean, personally, I had a rougher childhood. I had to grow up quick. I came in, I wasn't going to give up over something small. I've never felt like giving up because I'm also super stubborn at the end of the day. But uh, I really feel like I read this book called Thick Skin by Hilary Peach. It's basically a book written by a Boilermaker from Canada, and it's just her telling stories of her time on the field. She got in the 90s. She was the only woman for a super long time. She never saw another woman on the job site, and people were ruthless to her. But the way
Mm-hmm.
that she carried herself through these stories was really inspiring to me. And it's really shifted how I view anytime somebody wants to be terrible to me.
Mm-hmm.
And I've really gotten to the point where I stay super positive because they want to tear you down and I refuse to give it to them and I don't give them a reaction. That's all they're looking for at the end of the day is a reaction. You can call me any name in the book and I don't care because at the end of the day, I'm just here to do my job. That's all I see it as. And also another aspect that I get is guys are always scared of lawsuits and they think, oh, if I work with this girl, she's going to sue me. So a lot of guys are really nervous working around me.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll kind of joke, try to break the ice because I can't have you all nervous all day. I don't care. I always tell them, I'm like, I don't care. Just work with me like a coworker. That's all it is.
No, kudos to you. So, wise words beyond your age, because that resiliency. First off, I think you're right. I think you are right that you can. It's like leadership. You
Hmm.
can build leadership, but some people seem to be born with an enormous. They get more of it.
Yeah.
Now you got to build that up, but some people seem to be born into it, life skills and whatever. So some people seem to be born with more resiliency than others.
Hmm.
And then, of course, during the process. What I find interesting is that you said that I mean, the whole thing is interesting, but you said that they're looking for a reaction, and you're exactly right. I mean, I can remember, like, this has been a long time ago, but I can remember when I would have journeymen yelling at me,
Hmm.
and they just want you to yell back so that they can in turn yell some more.
Yeah.
And I'd be like, I'd be like, I'm right here, man. You ain't got to yell. What do you need? And it would just
Hmm.
completely deflate the whole situation.
Yeah.
take the wind out of their sails. And I can only imagine what it's like, in the instances that you're talking about. So kudos to you, because it can't be easy. It's a
No.
continual thing, but going the extra mile, because I'm stubborn, and I'm sure that I'm resilient. I'm sure it's helped you out in not just your work too. It's probably been very helpful in multiple aspects of your life.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Building resiliency all the time. When you got negative people and naysayers who are like, you're not being successful. Why are you wasting your time doing this? Why, some people would just collapse like a house of cards. But when you're building that resiliency up, and I'm not saying that everybody should go through the same BS that you've dealt with in the job per se, but when you're building that resiliency up, you can then look and face all of the other things that you're going to deal with in your everyday life. And
Yeah.
so kudos to you, for kind of pushing forward and keeping your nose to the grind, as it were, because it can't be easy, I'm sure.
Yeah. Some days
And
are better than others.
so I will give you that, right? And that last point you brought up about people being nervous. When I've talked to it's hundreds of people, not on this platform, but doing a lot of research for the website and whatever. Most guys really just care about two things. Number one, can somebody else that's coming on the job, can they do the work? Can you do the work? That's what they, because if you can't do the work, then I've got to take on more work to accommodate whatever you're doing.
Absolutely.
And then second, it's like, okay, well, do I have to walk on eggshells? And that's what you're talking about. Like, I'm walking on eggshells. You're like, look, just treat me like a normal human being that I work around like a coworker, and then we'll go forward and everything is good to go.
Yeah.
That's it. So, kudos to you for taking that extra step and going, well, I'm going to break the ice, because this is not, we don't need to work like this.
Yeah.
So, wise words.
Thank you.
Yeah. I'm super impressed, by the way. So at what point after getting into the local do your parents or your family is like, we're a little proud of you on this one?
Definitely when I got in. I feel like there was definitely a major stereotype, maybe, of the job that I was doing before, because it really didn't pay all that well and I wasn't getting treated good.
Yeah.
So they definitely weren't proud of that. But when I got into the local and they saw that what I was doing, they definitely got proud of me then. It really just took me getting in there for them to be proud.
Yeah. No, there are places like Chicago or some of the other major metropolitan areas where there's a wait list, and there's
Yeah.
a robust application process. We don't have that process, or
Wow.
we don't have that. It's not, we have the exact opposite. I think this is across, pretty much across the country. I think a lot of locals, no matter what the trade is, they have to go out and effectively recruit for their contractor base. And then they have to turn around, and I don't know how this is for you guys, but then they have to turn around and convince the contractors to take on apprentices, because it's so bad. Because, all right, so I'm 43, and I don't know if I'll be curious to know what your experience is out there in Chicago, but everybody I've talked to, when you go on a job, you see people who are 30 and younger. Most of the time it's 25 and younger. And then you see people who are 50 plus. The 30s and the 40s are, you'll have people there, but that
Yeah.
number is really small.
Yeah.
And it's a natural consequence of you got to go to college to get a good job. There is this other thing where we would tell people, well, you don't want to work with your hands, as if it's something that's, it's not noble to work with your hands. This is like a systemic problem. And then we told young people, well, you got to, the future's online, the future's with computers. And so all of that has pretty much taken millennials, for the most part, they're not in the trades. So now we got to a point where we have so much work and you have so many baby boomers retiring that
Mm-hmm.
what's effectively taking place is companies are going, I've got too much work and I got, older people retiring. I can't afford to stop and take the time to train apprentices because I've got all this work and I want somebody. And I'm going, you can't afford not to train them, because if you don't train them now, in 10 years, you are going to be you're in a bad spot now. In 10 years, you're going to be into a really bad spot.
Yeah.
And so that's what we're finding is that I've talked to so many people who are like, look, I know that you're busy, but you have got to be intentional and look at taking apprentices on as an investment, because
Mm-hmm.
if you don't, you're going to be in a really bad spot. So that might not be the case for you guys. Doesn't sound like it, because you're like, really,
No.
but I mean, it's amazing the number of companies who are just when I call, I want somebody with 20 years of experience, and we're like, they're all
That's
working.
incredible.
It's insane, because there's so many companies who are not, this is about as far as in front of their face as they can see. They
Yeah,
don't look
definitely.
long term. They don't see long term. They don't see, what they like. It's an enormous amount of work,
Mm-hmm.
and they don't. They're just not interested, or they're not in it, or I don't know what it is, but that doesn't sound like it's your experience, though.
No, not at all. It's funny you mentioned the worker gap between boomers because they're all retiring. Um,
Mm-hmm.
that was actually a huge push for me to get into the trades because my welding instructor showed us that graph of how many people were going to be retiring and how many spots they would need to fill the workers.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a huge motivation factor for me to even get into the trades.
Yeah, you know what? I'd like to shake the hand of your welding instructor, because he's a very smart person. You know
Yeah.
that I mean, like, because there's so many. I have Look, I've been overly critical of the industry as a whole. I have said over and over and over again that the main reason why younger people are coming into the trade, it is not some mystical thing that the industry as a whole is actually doing to try to recruit people. I've said it's primarily because the cracks in the narrative that you got to go to college to get a good job are too big to ignore.
Yeah.
And it's certainly also one of the other additional reasons that, based upon our conversation here, I'm starting to glean from, is that it's also because of the sheer amount of opportunity that's being created because the older people are retiring.
Hmm.
And that is the fact that he showed you that. He showed everybody that in the class,
Yeah.
or was it just in a conversation?
No,
Everybody?
he showed everyone. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. That
Hmm.
that's that's awesome. What is your favorite thing about the trade? You got almost, 3 complete years in.
Hmm.
What is it? I mean, it's probably welding, but I'm just curious.
So it's actually not welding.
What? I
I
heard
do
that.
enjoy welding, but I would not say it's my favorite, if I'm being honest.
No, I love it.
Um,
Go ahead.
Personally, uh, I'm kind of a nerd. I'll take it. I love anything that I can really just solve if it's a problem. I love layout because I like trying to envision something in my head and place it
Mm-hmm.
out on the floor. I love the odd angle offsets. I love figuring those out. But a latest endeavor of mine has actually been taking service classes. So the past year, I've been taking a lot of refrigeration and service classes. And I have been loving that lately. I've been able to get on a few service jobs with our service tech, and I love that. And it might be something that I look into the future doing more. I would love to be a fitter and a tech at the same time. How attainable it is, I don't know, but I think I could do it.
I shoot for the stars. That's why I love it.
Yeah.
So is it more bookwork that you're appreciative of than the how does what does it look like?
I'd say no, definitely not bookwork. I love the troubleshooting aspect of service because I love trying to figure out a problem. Um,
Okay.
but also, I guess there is definitely bookwork involved with math problems for odd angle offsets, but it's not that much. It's a lot of laying it out on the floor and doing your
Mm-hmm.
57 and a quarter and figuring it out from there. And I love that.
So is this would it be? I'm trying to envision it myself, right? So
Hmm.
look. If you took the word nerd, I'll own it as well. It's one of the reasons. It's one of the reasons I started the podcast, because people were like, I have a website that I've been writing articles for a long time about different things, and people are like, you should start a podcast. And so I'm always researching, I'm always reading, I'm always curious. And so this like commercial? This is like commercial work. People have problems, and you're kind of problem solving from a troubleshooting perspective.
A lot of our HVAC work is commercial or industrial. We
Okay.
don't do
Okay.
residential.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but
I don't.
mainly it's sorry. Mainly
No,
it's
commercial or industrial. Yeah.
commercial rooftop units. I've done fan coil unit startup, heat pumps, that thing. Yeah.
No, it's awesome. I think it's fantastic. What's your least favorite thing about the trades?
I don't know if I can say it, but it's just like assholes. I I've always said the work has never bothered me. I love the work. I work at a poop plant. Love it. I don't care. It does not phase me. But the thing that will phase me is the people.
Yeah. No.
But
So,
in the same aspect, something I love about my trade too is the union solidarity. When people
mhm.
come together, there's nothing like it. So it's a double edged sword sometimes.
Yeah. You know what? Kudos. I mean, I have said this for a long, long time. I have said we are our own worst enemy in a lot of
Mm-hmm.
ways. You'll get. I have seen. I'm an industrial person. I don't particularly care for commercial work at all. I like, heavy industrial. Um, and the more rare, the better.
Mm-hmm.
It's nothing for me to. I've dealt with some 1,000-ton crank, million-pound picks, and that stuff is a lot of fun. But I've seen contractors get into places, and I've seen them, and it wasn't the contractor, it was the employee or the member go into a place and act a complete fool. And I'm like, are you serious? And you can do an enormous amount of work, in one person, one bad apple, can
Yeah.
just destroy a
Mm-hmm.
reputation. I mean, it can do a lot of damage. So I certainly, understand where you're at with that. So it makes perfect sense, and it is a double edged sword. There can
Yeah.
be some really nice people, but there can be some total complete jerks out there. You're like, oh my
Absolutely.
gosh, unbelievable! I can't believe that you said that or did that, or I mean,
Mm-hmm.
like, come on now. Um, I've kind of gauged this throughout the conversation, but I'm going to take a guess and say, I mean, the trades have been this trade, and especially being in the union, has been extremely positive for your life. I mean, it's been a
Oh yeah.
huge net positive.
Uh huh. Absolutely.
Um, so before we get into the last couple of questions that we've got, when you talk to people, and I don't know if you ever get the chance to or not, but when you talk to people, and because we'll get a chance to talk, your final couple of questions will be, what can you say to young people? But how do you adequately express the pay and the benefits? Because most people, remember earlier I said that the trade school and the registered apprenticeship program model gets confused. There's so many
Mm-hmm.
people who confuse it on Reddit. So when I try to equate and tell people, like, listen, do you understand what you're getting paid? And people be like, I'm not taking a pay cut as an apprentice if they are making a lot of money at let's say, a non-union place.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm like, yeah, but do you know the benefits that you get on top of that? And so I'm trying to explain that to
Yeah.
people, and it just so what are the conversations like for you? Because that's a big selling point.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's a
Um,
massive selling point.
I mean, something basic that I've done in the past is I've said, hey, I had so many cavities filled and it only cost me $150. Like, I, it, healthcare statements make a big point. Us, we have wellness centers that you can go in. They do what you,
Yeah.
obviously there's a limitation to what they can do, but for physicals or blood work or if you're sick, you go in there, they give you the medication sometimes if they can fill it, and you leave and you never have to pay. And so I feel like the healthcare benefits are so huge. I mean, so many people don't have health insurance. My husband, before I married him, was had this terrible insurance plan that was like $3,000 deductible.
Hmm.
And you just see there's so many things that I don't even have to think about that other people are struggling with severely, like our retirement benefits. I don't have to
Hmm.
worry about my retirement. It's besides me putting into my 401k every week, it's all done for me. I don't have to worry about it. And I mean, as far as pay goes, I if somebody asks me, I'll tell them, but are they're always negotiating under new contracts and
Hmm.
giving us raises every so many years. So they're always keeping up with inflation of cost, and I just really feel so adequately paid for what I do. And there's just so much on top of it too.
It's a nice feeling, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you brought up one point that I knew about the healthcare centers from my ironworker counterparts up there
Hmm.
in Chicago. But you're young. What do you now? This is I didn't have this on here, but it did kick a thought off in my mind. When you talk about health insurance, there are so many talking heads out here that would say to young people, you don't need health insurance because you're young and you're healthy and all this noise. And I'm like, that is a stupid line of what it really is oftentimes, I'm not saying that I'm broad brushing, but what it really is, people have a vested interest in you not having health insurance so that you'll work for less. So what do you say to that? Because that is a huge point that you just brought up. There's so many people who just bite into that hook, line, and sinker. Well, I'm young and I'm healthy. I'm like, yeah, that's ridiculous. That's a stupid statement.
uh First of all, that's crazy, but
Thank you. By the way,
I do think also part of it is as a young person, there's a lot of things that feel so unattainable. And you're landing maybe your first job out of college and you're not getting paid a whole lot. And oh, also, you don't have health insurance. And it's like, I guess I'm fine because how else am I supposed to get it? At least I've
hmm
met people in my life who have kind of that attitude of, I'm not going to get it and I'm young, so I'm fine. But personally, since I have it, I take full advantage of it. I mean, I'm going to the chiropractor, I'm getting my annual physical. There's so many things that I can do that are preventative, and I need my body for my career. If my body goes
hmm
out, then I don't have a job. So it's my number one priority to keep my body healthy. And I have good insurance, so why wouldn't I?
yeah. Oh, it makes perfect sense to me. I just this is a this is a talking point that anti-union individuals
Yeah.
will use routinely.
Mm.
They will say, "Well, why?" This is what they'll say. It's something to the effect of, "Well, younger people are subsidizing older people's health care." But when I talk to other young people, they're like, yeah, I'm using it too. What are you talking about? Like,
Yeah.
I'm getting my physicals. I'm getting the checkups. I am using it to the degree that it warrants, the contribution. And the other thing that's, kind of interesting about this is, and I know that it's got to be the same way with you guys, is it's on top of my check. It's not,
Hmm.
I try to explain this all the time. Like, if, let's just say I'll make it up, but let's just say that your wage is $40 an hour. You in the non-union space, you're out of that $40, you're now paying
Yeah.
health insurance. And if you have a retirement, you're paying it out of that. But that's not the case for us.
Mm-mm.
Your health care is on top of that and is contributed on your behalf. Your pension fund, it's contributed on top of that on your behalf, as well as the annuity or a 401k for some, it's
Yeah.
kind of the same really, but that's so important. And we're doing what I would say the whole industry as a whole, by the way. I think there's probably pockets that do a better job of conversing and getting the word out, but for the most part, I think the entire industry does a relatively poor job at getting the word out. It's one of the reasons
Yeah.
why I like having these conversations, because I want to not only, put it out there, but then have let you tell your story, right?
Hmm.
Which, by the way, thank you for coming on here. But it also gives you something to share out and push, because someone that's young, they may be more interested in what you have to say than me. That's fine. That's
Yeah.
great. That's fine with me. All I
Hmm.
want to do is actually speak a little bit of truth into your life and tell you that there's a lot of talking points that people who you believe have your best interest in mind, they don't. They don't have your best interest in mind. They look at you as a number. They want to exploit you. They don't care specifically about you, and they're gonna get over on you, however they can. So,
Hmm.
interesting stuff. So, and we're down to our last couple of questions here. I know people probably like 30-minute podcasts, but I just cannot do it when I'm having conversations with somebody else.
Yeah.
It's
I like
impossible
longer
to do it.
podcasts, so
Yeah, well, that's awesome, because now on the solo ones that I put out, I try to get them about 30-35 minutes, but these right here, they end up being an hour. The
hmm.
last one I did with Jermaine, that was like an hour and 15 minutes or something like that. So it's just too much. But last question for you. If you could, if you had 5 minutes, 10 minutes, it doesn't matter how long, I don't care. What would you say to young people? Like, you got a platform,
Hmm.
you are going to get a chance to talk to young people, and you can think of it as somebody that's looking for career advice, looking for life advice, whatever. What would you say to a young person?
um well, I would say that the trades, I feel, are one of the best careers right now for people, union trades, because of, I mean, where can you find a pension, 401k, and health insurance all
Mm-hmm.
together? It's almost unheard of these days. And
Yeah.
so I really recommend it for that aspect. But I will also say to younger people who are thinking about the trades is that you have to be resilient and you have to be tough. The trades, I'm a firm believer, are not for everybody, and that's okay.
Yeah.
You have to have a very specific mindset going in to make it a career for you.
Yeah.
Um, but the trades, for me at least, are extremely fulfilling. Every day I get off of the job and I feel like I did something. You can see what you do, and
Yep.
it's a lot of younger people are really artistic, and I feel like the trades is art. Every day you're making something with your hands, and it really is such an artistic career, especially welding. I feel, uh,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you're making that. It is so cool. It is so fulfilling. So I just feel like I wish more younger people got into the trades because myself, I find it such a fulfilling career. But it's just not promoted as it should be. Everybody's told they have to go to college. You don't have to go to college to be successful. There's no
Mm-hmm.
reason. I mean, sure, there's some jobs you need a college degree for, but I feel like these days it's not even worth it. You're getting almost 100K in debt for a job
Mm-hmm.
that's going to pay you $40,000 a year. I
Yeah.
mean, our apprentices just starting out are making $30,000 to $40,000 a year, and that's with just a high school education. So I definitely don't buy into the college scam. I think it's a scam sometimes because not everybody needs to go to college to be successful in their life. And the friends I have in my life who do have college degrees aren't even working in the field that they got their degree in. It's
Uh-huh.
something completely different that they taught on their own. So that would be
Yeah.
my advice.
No, I well said. There's nothing I could add to it. You took numerous talking points that I have mentioned. Now,
Uh huh.
now, that was the last question, but I want to encourage you now. Um, I don't know about I was going to ask this question, but I'm not going to. The mentor perspective. It's it's the same in one way, because we're not mentoring like we should.
Mm-hmm.
And that's applicable for both sides.
Absolutely.
However, as a woman in the trades, you are not only are you building resiliency, but I think you're also building yourself up to be. And I was talking about this with another apprentice the other day, and I said, because one of his big beefs was I'll come up with ideas and people will dismiss them because I'm an apprentice. And I said, okay, look, remember what that feels like so that when you get into the position that you're a journeyman, right, that you don't sweep that under the rug, that you remember what that's like so that you
Mm-hmm.
then in turn go and mentor younger people. So I would like to encourage you. Number one, I think you're wise beyond your years. I think that it's going to serve you very well. The second thing that I would say, and I would like to encourage you, is to remember what that double-edged sword is like dealing with some of the
Yeah.
people so that you in turn become a mentor to someone else. Because
Mm-hmm.
we have I'm going to say, an institutional problem where we're not actively mentoring people today. The industry as a whole, I believe, and I feel like this, and I really do believe this, is that the industry has followed much of corporate America and that we're going to offshore any training, any investment, we want to go and get somebody and bring them in and we think they're going to know everything right off the gate. And it's like, this is not the case. And so what we've done then is that we have a long way to go when it comes to mentoring people. And mentoring goes much further than work too, you know?
Mm-hmm.
It goes into your personal, I mean, because, anybody that says, well, I can just shave off personal time and go into work, it's like, yeah, tell it to the guy who had a bad day and then he brings it to work with him. Happens all
Yeah.
the time. And so I want to encourage you. I think you're wise beyond your years, and I hope that you use the lessons to be a more effective mentor for somebody that comes in behind you.
I
And I
mean,
hope that you'll do that.
I really like that. I've never heard anybody phrase it that way, but almost using your own uncomfortable situations for something good. That's really awesome. I know
Yeah.
myself, I've really benefited from awesome mentors, especially at my contractor now. And I just know the trades would be a lot harder had I not have them in my professional career guiding me. We
That's
all,
it's a wonderful
yeah.
thing. And I
Hmm.
and I certainly hope, I mean, it's 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 definitely something that I hope you'll do.
Hmm.
And I hope you'll do it to the best of your ability because we can do better. I
Yeah.
think that we I think we need to do better and I think that we can do better. And so I applaud you for the way you handle things, the way you're sticking in there, the way and I think ultimately what you'll end up doing is you'll take it all. You already do it anyway. You take it all and use it for your own personal growth and gratification. I think it's just a natural reaction to take it and then turn around and go, oh, I see that person behind me coming in.
Hmm.
Let me take you underneath my wing, if you will, and show you some things or encourage you, right? And just encourage that
Yeah.
person. Say, look, I know that you got to build resiliency, but if you've got you need somebody to talk to, the word even mentoring doesn't have to come up. It's just an
Hmm.
actual practice that we desperately, I think, need to engage in more with other people. So that's my
Absolutely.
encouragement to you. I hope you do that, and I hope that you'll think about it in a way that will encourage. Like your entire career
Hmm.
will be nothing but job satisfaction. It'll be shoring up, obviously your financial house, right? But then it'll also be a string. You can connect the dots of people you've mentored over the years. I think that right there is probably one of the most valuable things that when people actively engage in it, they go, I feel super, we walk by all the time or drive by, buildings we put up or hospitals we've
Hmm.
worked on or whatever. We go,
Yeah.
I built that, I built that, I built that. But if you can look at somebody in 10 years from now, if you can look at somebody and go, that person comes up to you and they say, I really appreciate the help you gave me, the time you took to pour into me or to teach me or to talk me off the ledge. I was getting ready to drag up and say, to hell with this. But you were like, listen, stick with me here. This is a good job. There are a-holes, but there's a-holes everywhere. And no matter
Yeah.
what career you go into, I think that is one of the most valuable things that the trades can do that we don't talk about enough at all, actually.
Yeah.
So I hope that's your future. I hope, I think you got a bright future. You're very, very wise. I hope your future also includes mentoring. So
Me too. Well, I think the whole structure of a union is the older generation passing on knowledge to the newer generation. So if we're not mentoring in a union, we're failing our union.
I'm in agreement there. Have you ever heard of a guy named Mark Breslin?
No.
So on my website, there is a book review of his most recent book called The 5-Minute Foreman. That book is very, very good. I think that book ought to be incorporated in every single foreman training class that's out there, because he has a conversation with a bunch of people in a room, and he says, raise your hands if you've been mentored at some time. And by the way, he's a consultant for like a lot of union contractors. And about 70% of the hands in the room go up. And so he says, okay, now how many of you are actively mentoring? And only about 30% of the hands remained up. And he said, that's a problem. And he said, so he's asking them why. And they're saying things like, well, the younger people, they just don't want to be taught. They just don't want to be this. And I'm going, I read that. Okay. And I'm going, you're the older person. You're supposed to be wiser. You're supposed to be more mature. And if that's the case, and if that's what you would claim, then it's incumbent on you, who has all of that, to then find ways to talk to younger people, to mentor to them, to speak into their life and not just go, I'm done. I don't want to talk to you. And so it's a failure then on us. And so you are right that it would be a failure on, let's say, the union, but the union is nothing more really than us as people. And people, I think, are failing other people, unfortunately, in a lot of ways. And so I don't know if you like to read or whatever, but the book is relatively straightforward. It's not that thick at all. And he writes, he's one of those authors that has like 60 chapters in the book. Like chapters are like 3 pages long. Like, there's not, we move on from thought. So it's a very easy read. So
yeah, I'll definitely have to give it a read.
Oh, it's a great book. As a matter of fact, I'll be teaching foreman training class this year coming up in the apprenticeship, and I intend on bringing my copy so that I could incorporate, because he's got it's 5 minutes. That's why it's called the 5-Minute Foreman. He has a whole section of 5-minute drills or 5-minute things that you as a prospective foreman can do to, because you're going to manage $1 million projects. Why don't we have any professional development on that regard? So it's a great book. I highly recommend it. Well, Emily, look, I want to say thank you. I really appreciate the time that you have carved out on your Saturday to come on here and talk to me. Not only will obviously the podcast episode will get put together or whatever, but I have gleaned from you, and I'm grateful for the time that you've given me and the platform in general. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you for having me. I do appreciate it.
Oh, it's a wonderful thing. I love getting other people's perspectives, other crafts, other parts of the country, other young people, other generations. There's a lot to be brought in. And for those of you who might be older and are listening, the young people are the future. You can't dismiss them. You got to talk to them. You got to converse with them. You got to, build some camaraderie with them. So, Emily, thank you.
Thank you.